Well, a very warm welcome to you to High Fell here up in the Durham Dales. It's very windy outside, and as you can see, I'm just showing you some of the 200 and odd trees that I've made, and this is how I've done it. Okay, so we're going to take a look at the materials I use to make trees. First of all, these pre-made tree armatures. You'll see that I'm generally using Woodland Scenics materials. They're freely available, not particularly expensive if you buy stuff in component form, and also easy to work with, and that really kind of helps, particularly when you decide to do volumes of trees. So that's the tree armature. I'm now starting to use this polyfiber to make the base of the canopy, which is going to be going over the tree when I've shaped it. You can buy a material that's almost got the polyfiber in it, and then it's got the foliage stuck to it. As you can see, that tends to fall off whilst you're doing it. It is quite expensive in comparison to the way I've actually favoured, and that is, I get the clump foliage, so these larger bags, which are useful for all sorts of bits of scenery. I get 3 different colours, mix them into one of these cheap food processor blender things, and whiz it down. You can pick these up quite cheap, particularly if people have got ones where the seals are broken, so they're not low, so they're no longer waterproof, but of course it's foam, so it's not going to leak out everywhere. So that'll chew that up nicely, and you end up with this quite fine material. I'm modelling in TT120, so I've tried to get this a little bit finer than you would possibly for 00, although trees are trees and get different shapes and sizes. You might want to go a bit finer if you're in one of the smaller scales like N, or goodness knows what you do if you're in T gauge. Then as a final finish, I use blended turf. I buy this actually as blended turf. I'm not going to try and make that into this, because I think that would kill that little food processing. I think it was only about a £5 as it was. Spice shaker. This makes applying blended turf so much easier. You can direct it, you can get a nice sort of scatter pattern with it, and it's so much easier than trying to pour it out of a bag or even using a teaspoon. And again, something that you'll probably have kicking in the back of the kitchen that you've used up. So I'm very lucky in that I live next door to an old wood, or ancient woodland, and so I've got a really good example of what trees look like. This shows the tree branches and the basic armature in one plasticky brown colour, but of course trees aren't. In fact, very rarely are the branches brown. They're normally multiples of colours, everything from silvers and greys, blacks, greens, where you're starting to get fungi and lichen and stuff like that growing. So I'll make up myself a little palette of colours. Great idea. If you get your acrylic paint, stick it into one of these little things, make up your palette. You can put a plastic bag and elastic band over the top. This will last for ages before drying out, and it just means, again, you're not wasting paint. So next thing we're going to do is start shaping a tree. So here we are with the basic armature. Going to keep the base and just use that while I'm making the tree. When it actually comes to fitting the tree to the layout, just drill a hole and glue that in. It's not particularly realistic, that, but it is a useful thing to have just to stand it whilst the tree's drying. Something which I've never really seen. I've got a lot of trees, as I say, outside the window, and I've never seen one where you've got a little tiny branch grow at the bottom, so don't like that. Can nip that off. You can do that with any bits and pieces if you want to change the branches. Don't worry if you've got a little bit of flash on there, because underneath the canopy you're not really going to see it too much. But what we will do is just start shaping the tree and getting it into a much rounder shape. Sometimes you really do need to twist them to get the branches to be where you want them to be and create the shape you want. These are deciduous trees. There's different shapes within the pack, about 4 or 5, and sort of slightly different sizes as well. And then there are other sizes of tree. And something I've realised that I've done, and a lot of other people I've noticed have done, is underestimate the size of trees. They are huge. If you look at a tree in comparison to a railway line particularly where they're older trees, not sort of the young growth and stuff like that, you'll notice that they are huge, particularly the ones that are based around the bottom of viaducts and stuff like that, where they've been grown probably 150, nearly 200 years, and they get to quite a height of good 60, 70, 80 feet easily in the UK. So don't be scared of using bigger trees. Also bear in mind the width of the trunk as well. So a big tree is going to have a large trunk, but if you compare the size of that, say with a window on a coach, you'll suddenly realise that the trees need to be a lot bigger. One of the reasons why I think things like sea foam is okay, but unless you're actually modelling some quite spindly trees, it's not that accurate. But you can do whatever you like. You know, there's no rules almost in nature in such what things are going to look like. So I've just opened all that out. Only takes a few moments. Do be careful because these can be a little bit pokey, not sharp, but you can sort of poke yourself and get caught under the nail. And then that is going to be the basis for the tree. So now we're just going to add some colour. It doesn't have to be too precise or exact, because as I say, things are so random. I'm just picking up different bits of colour. As much as anything, it's to take the gloss of the plastic off. These wooden scenic tree armatures are not bad for being quite matte and muted. You can do these whilst they're flat like that, but I am only using acrylic paint, and so you can end up rubbing it all back off again, making it all a bit pointless. And also you might just like, it takes a little bit longer, but sometimes it's just enjoyable to spend a little bit of time making something and not rush it too much. Something I always used to do when I was modelling was always too much of a rush. But that's what happens when you're younger, isn't it? Just a little bit of water in there, just picking up, and just add a few different tones and stuff like that. I am not, or ever have been, at all artistically minded, as you can see, but I'm quite good at impressionist stuff, so from a distance it doesn't look so bad. And most of what I try and achieve on my layout is I want it to look something like, but I'm not going to fret over the last few details, so it's just making it the appearance of something that's accurate, and try to make it less toy-like as well. Purchased trees, one of the problems I've noticed with them is that they can be quite toy-like, even though they're quite expensive. And then of course you get to the absolutely amazing ones, which you can spend £100 on one tree and it does just look exactly like a tree but in miniature. I'm not quite into that league. So there we go, we've just given that a quick going over. It's got rid of quite a bit of the brown. You can leave some brown, and just, you know, wood can be brown in places. It can be just about any colour you want. As you watch this, you'll probably end up starting looking at trees now, and that's actually not a bad thing, just to start paying a bit more attention to what's going on. Okay, so the next thing is, once that's dry, we're going to actually start making the canopy. So the armature has been painted, it's just about dry. If you're rolling these up with a little production line, by the time you've done a few of those, they'll always be dry. Now, I just get some of this polyfibre, really tease it out, and then where it gets quite thready at the ends, just fold that back in so that it doesn't hang down as a random piece. And then all you need to do, you can do this in several pieces, it doesn't all have to be in one, so you can leave patches where there might not be any leaves or any greenery, sort of like here, because there's no branches. you're looking to try and get this onto the ends. Just take another piece, pull it out. You can see if you use the clump foliage that's already got the polyfibre with the other parts on, you can see why it starts to all fall off. There's quite a bit on there, and you can always stick it back on, it's not a problem, but you end up sort of having to do it like that anyway. So and this I think is a more cost-effective way. You get more components for your money, and to give you an idea, on High Fell there are already over 200 trees there. They just seem to disappear into the scenery, but they really do. Certainly for the type of layout I'm going for that scenery, for me that's the thing that's when it started to really look like the countryside and the scenery that I was seeing when I was out and about. So there we go. Now you can see there's a bit poking out there, don't worry about that. The next thing we're going to do is spray it with some adhesive, and then we'll start applying the surface, so to the kitchen. So you can see I use scenic cement. I put one of these little spray tops on top of the bottle. It seems to be less wasteful than transferring this to another container, and you end up rinsing another container out. And then just give it a decent spray over. I'm using this container just to reduce the amount of cleaning up later. It is worthwhile doing quite a few of these together. So you can see it's also stuck to the to some of the branches. Don't worry about that. Again, if you actually look at trees, there's often quite a lot of growth of either ivy and other bits and pieces there, so I'm not really too worried about some extra stickage on there. So now I'm going to start adding the foliage, which is the blended mix that I did of several colours. First of all, just dropping it on, and then you need to squidge it slightly to get it to stick. It's not going to stick completely at this stage, and what we'll do is we're going to give it a finishing layer. You can mould this foam quite nicely to start creating the bits, and if you've got bits of branch sticking out, you can just mould some pieces of foam around it. Okay, and also you can always come back to this as well. You can always have more than one go at it. That's one of the things I actually really enjoy about the hobby, that if you've done something and you're just not that happy with it, just do it again. Right, so we've now got the big chunks of foam on, and then we're going to go in with the blended turf. You'll see it starts to add an extra level of texture. The thing I've actually learnt about scenery is it's all about layers. So that's where we're starting with this. Just going to pop that into there, another piece on there, and then it's back to the adhesive, and then just give it a final coat over, and that'll help set it all and so it doesn't all fall off. So this has had its final layer of scenic cement, and I shall leave that overnight to set. So that's how I've made the trees here on High Fell, and as you can see, by altering the amounts of clump foliage and blended turf and the colours, you can create some quite different effects on the trees. So thank you very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed that. Maybe it's inspired you to make some of your own trees. I'm just going to leave you some shots now of the Horse Express making its way from Liverpool through to Tyne Dock via High Fell in the Durham Dales.